Much has been written and said during recent years about the ways in which the national press, both print and electronic, are manipulated by politicians and by the political system. But in a non-presidential campaign like this one, it is the local press which is in large part responsible for voter perception of both the campaigns and the campaigners. And in a year when much of the nation looks to Minnesota as a barometer of heartland sentiment, that role played by local news media falls under deepening scrutiny by both campaigners and reporters alike.
It's very frustrating for a candidate or a person in my position to listen to the constant haranguing from the press, to talk about issues. When are we going to start to talk about issues? And it's so frustrating because the real truth is the press will not cover anything that discusses issues because it isn't interesting to the general public.
You know, we do concentrate an awful lot on the games playing. We view the race as it's a foot race. It's a game to see who's winning. And we see, we look at polls and strategies, Bob Short's Boundary Waters Canoe Area strategy, things like that. And we see that as very interesting, not only to us, but to the readers, and our editors agree.
Along with the criticism that they don't adequately cover election year issues, Twin Cities news media are also subject to another common criticism of the press. That is, that they are often successfully manipulated by individual candidates or political parties, that they will almost instinctively flock to any event boasting big-name national celebrities, whether or not the event is deemed important. The result is free, front-page or prime-time news exposure to candidates who have done nothing more newsworthy than to arrive at the right place at the right time.
But you do worry about being trapped in covering a ceremonial event where there's really little actual news. It's a fellow coming in who's a big name and saying, I endorse Wendy Anderson or Rudy Boschwitz. There's no news there. And I think it's more of a television story than it is a newspaper story.
I think we see those pretty much for what they are. They are an effort, like the Kennedy visit was, to draw attention, to focus the cameras, the microphones, and the pencil reporters on a given candidate. Mm-hmm. I like to think we're able to stand back and put the thing in some sort of perspective and say, why are these people doing this? Is it because the campaign's in trouble, or is it just a legitimate effort on the part of a given party to try and enlighten the people as to a given piece of legislation or a candidate?
Mm-hmm. But aside from general concerns over the ways in which local media cover the campaign, some observers voice specific criticisms over the extent of political coverage offered by individual news and public affairs organizations. D.J. Leary, media analyst for Wendell Anderson, is particularly displeased by public television.
When I confronted the program decision makers and management and public television in this state about possibly meeting their obligations, and they passed it off that way and said, well, we're going to do a program called Campaign Weekly, which was, really a Band-Aid on an opening artery, because the thing aired 4 days, I think, before the primary, and never really dealt with the very significant and vital issues. And we haven't had a primary as important in this state as that. Now, if anybody has an obligation to the public, it's public television.
But if that allegation has been made, and I interpret it to mean that there isn't enough coverage on public television of the political process, I'd certainly agree. Campaign Weekly, though, does a little more, perhaps, than the nightly news does. It's more than we've ever done, but not enough. Absolutely not enough.
And even the final product, be it a local television newscast or newspaper story, rarely presents as complete an analysis of an individual issue or event as the reporter or news director would himself like to see.
Eyewitness News, the Northwest's most complete, comprehensive, and up-to-the-minute coverage.
We've never made any pretensions that we are able to give the entire picture of the entire story of a given candidate or campaign. We try to give a good summary on a given day of what a candidate has said or what a campaign is doing or where it's going, with the hope that the viewer will supplement that information, will seek out more detail, flesh it out, if you will, by turning to the newspapers.
I guess I don't trust myself to choose between two candidates unless I have a good idea of what they're like in person. And I don't think that a newspaper can give you enough of that. It can give you issues. It can give you some insight into their personalities. But I think you really need to see a guy in person in a give-and-take situation with his opponent.
The conclusion here, quite simply, is that voters who intend to go to the polls a week and a half from now, armed only with information and impressions gleaned from newspapers or television, are making a mistake, because the press, both print and electronic, is admittedly ill-suited and ill-prepared to provide voters with the breadth and depth of understanding required to make intelligent Election Day decisions. And only when voters themselves take the responsibility for their own electoral education will they be assured of making wise and carefully considered choices. I'm Bill Hanley.